Okay, great. So now it's official. You're in the class. We're being recorded. I have a slide up. We're ready to go. So let's start with a little review from last week, which was that first and second wave, revenue models, business processes, value chains, and SWOT, international nature of business, the pluses and the minus. I think it's fair to say that I'm not going to rehash it, but I think in your individual exercises that I could see that you guys as a community, you understand this mostly. And so I think I would not spend any time going back on these topics to review them, other than to reinforce that we learned stuff in the first wave and we applied them into the second wave. And mostly it was that we applied basic business principles to e-commerce, and that e-commerce is yet just another tool to apply to business. It's not rocket science. Nobody came up with another, physics. This isn't quantum in nature compared to, some other form or understanding of the universe. And then we go back into and we re-grounded ourselves using basic strategy models to help us think about, well, what is our business? And this is where you guys collectively did a very, very good job, which I didn't do this exercise in previous semesters, but what I liked is that it showed me that right away you have a very strong orientation for business, and then specifically the businesses that you called out that you're either working for or familiar with, and it's quite varied also. And I'm gonna ask a couple questions when we get down in homework 1 and homework 2 of a couple of you, because I liked some of the examples in that they were different based on different businesses, and by you sharing your own homework example, it will show the rest of the team kind of what I'm looking for to get out of this class, which is a general concept of e-commerce, but applied in a specific place that's interesting to you, to each of you, and that's different from person to person. I will say that not universally, but there is this, and I gave most of you very specific direct feedback. Not most of you, all of you, those that submitted the activity. And I would tell you, if you didn't submit the activity, you should do it anyway. And I don't know whether I'll give you credit for it or not, but I would probably be more inclined to give you credit, or at least consider it, as your final grade comes about. And you really should not miss core activities. It's not helpful, excuse me for a second, to your overall grade. So that said, the SWOT part that might need a little fine tuning is that strengths and weaknesses are internal. So these are the strengths of the organization or the agency or the business unit that you're considering, and an opportunity and a threat are external. And what students sometimes have problems with is they're learning to drive this car, the SWOT car, and do this analytics, is sometimes they'll say an opportunity is something that's internal, like that they could do something, and that's a strategy or a tactic, that thing you could do as an organization or a business unit, but the opportunity is why you're doing it. So for example, if you were to say, you could do like modify your marketing strategy to go beyond the geography, really the opportunity statement is not that. The opportunity statement is that you could expand your market by geography. And then, and I didn't ask for it in this exercise, but then you would be more articulate and specific as you were doing your analysis to say, why? What is it about that target market that shows some anticipated benefit? And then later in this class, not now, then you would go back and say, well, how can I invest in capturing that opportunity? The same thing with a threat. A threat is an external thing. A threat is not whether you're not good at something. A threat would be whether somebody else, whether it be an environmental situation like COVID as an example, or it could be a competitive situation where a competitor changed his direction and decides to come after you. That could be a threat. Maybe you're really successful in a new market niche and your competitors aren't aware of it yet, but you're, as they say, kind of waking the giant, and now they're gonna, as a threat, they could come after you. So and then if you say to yourself, okay, let's, and we're gonna do a case, by the way, as a home exercise, and you can see, like, okay, what if I thought that there was a high probability that that threat was gonna come after me? What could I do to mitigate the liability associated with that threat? And then this gets into this concept. I think I replied to one of you. I can't remember exactly who, but this is portfolio theory. This is, you learned it in your project management class and portfolio management class. Then you list all of the initiatives, the e-commerce initiatives that you could invest in, and then consider them as a priority. What's the probability or possibility that that opportunity or that threat is going to impact me, my organization, my business unit? And then you say, well, how much would I have to spend to either capture that opportunity or to mitigate that threat, mitigate that liability? And then you look at the cost benefit of these together, and then you have them just listed. Initiative 1, Initiative 2, Initiative 3, and then you prioritize. You go to the board of directors and the executive staff, and you guys and gals sit around and say, okay, that one has the biggest liability, and it only costs us this much money to mitigate that, so that we're gonna call that priority 1. We're gonna go do that. The next thing, here's a business opportunity. We can go make, 3 million crown if we go and do this, and our engineers and our business analysts have developed a project plan, and they think it would cost us 150,000 crown to develop an initiative and a solution to capture that opportunity. And then you look at those numbers and you go, well, that's a no-brainer. The return on investment is a multiplier. So boom, I'm gonna go do that. So this is the kind of nature of this exercise, is that it gives us a really broad view of these different business environments. And this is what we learned in the second wave, is that, and maybe I say this over and over again, maybe it's surprising to you, maybe it's not, but we actually went through this whole crazy period called the dot-com boom and dot-com bust, where we learned that, hey, 1 + 1 still equals 2. And then, of course, the last part of this chapter is about this international nature, that there are some positives and some negatives, and you just have to consider those as you go forward. I really appreciated your answers on screen time. I found them to be all over the place. Some of you are very diligent about keeping track of your time. You knew what you were doing, and you know why you're doing it. And if you're a procrastinator, you kind of know it. And then some of you were a bit surprised. You're like, wow, I didn't, 8 hours doing that. I didn't know it was that much time. Or that I picked up my phone yesterday 65 times and was interrupted. And what I said to most of you is that there's no judgment in this. I think there's this kind of universal blanket that people say about screen time, that it's bad. And at the physical level, yeah, it's bad. I should not be sitting here, and we actually know this in terms of the increase in people going to the doctor because of the ergonomics. That's the human interaction with things, the ergonomics that I've got my head down all the time looking at my phone, that I have particular physical ailments that, you know, there's that aspect of screen time. But the functional, the practical, what are you doing? I think that's where, you know, sometimes old folks need to like chill out a little bit and ask, what are we doing? And we should, I'm going to throw myself with you guys, us younger folks. Us younger folks should think about like, what are we doing? Now, if I'm watching a movie, you know, movie's like an hour and a half long, or maybe 2 hours long if it's a really, you know, if it's like Jurassic Park or something, whatever. So that's 2 hours. So if I'm watching a movie, but I'm in front of the screen. Historically, I would be in front of the TV. Or maybe the TV is my screen for my computer or whatever. So it's really, it's what are you doing? And I think that this is where we collectively, and this is really just a personal exercise. I was just trying to push to you, and I put some articles in Slack also that I wanted you to read about the human nature and how, and hopefully you've seen one or more of those movies that I sent you links to. The folks who are developing applications know that we are humans that respond to these interruptions in a particular way that generates, you know, dopamine, and so they're kind of they're totally playing with us, and we just have to and this is not about e-commerce as much as it's just about the nature of technology. We just have to be aware of, you know, how those things work. I mean, in terms of food, just as an analogy, it's the same thing. You shouldn't eat a bunch of processed foods with carbs, but it triggers dopamine in our body, and so it makes us like it. That's why we like go to get a donut and shove it in our face. We just yum, 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 because bang, 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 all those chemicals are firing off. And it's no different than when we pick up our phone and we respond to a text message. It is chemically no different. We have that trigger of the satisfaction, or, oh, I just got 5 likes on my Facebook post or my Instagram post. Or the people who create these applications, maybe they didn't start this way when they first wrote these applications, but over time, they now know what causes us to react, that it moves into this area of ethics and morality that we need to be careful of as users. And I think as practitioners, we also should do this responsibly wherever possible. So that was so I'm not going to, I don't know if anybody has any questions, or maybe if they want to make a comment. I'm not going to call anybody out on what their screen behavior experience was in their journal, but is anybody, I'm going to stop for a second. If you have any comments about your own observations, it'd be interesting if you want to share that. Okay. Not a forced exercise. Let me see this. Oh, wow. I think I can do this. Oh, look at that. I just learned something new. Hang on. All right, enough of that. I'm going to open it up to you guys. I might call on somebody if nobody says anything. unprompted, on your value chain of activities and SWOT. Again, as I said, everybody did a really good job, and there's quite a diversity in some of your circumstances as to what you identified as the e-commerce opportunity. But if I could, I'm going to just open it up first and ask you if anybody specifically wants to share their experience going through this exercise with the firm that they're familiar with. Such a quiet room. Sasha?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us what tell us about eShop, Work Intense.
Yeah, so I chose a company called Work Intense, which I've worked for, but I was working on their eShop because Work Intense itself is like a personal agency that recruits people and stuff like that. But they also have a eShop, and so what I had a problem with in the beginning was when you said choose one problem or opportunity. I wasn't sure when you meant problem, if you meant weakness or threat by this, because they're both like negative technically. First.
Right. I think you did it properly, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. You jumped on their weakness. This is the so describe the weakness.
1 second. So for weakness, I mentioned that not all the categories are fully completed, and there's some missing information. So like if you go click on, I don't know, for example, baby stuff or something, and then it just doesn't have all the categories there filled up. There's just blanks, and so you just don't end up finding what you need.
I'm sorry, why don't you say for a second, and by the way, everyone needs to do this generally, and when we get into I'm going to kick off the semester project today, and you always want to start with like, what is it that you're talking about? I know you said eShop, but I mean, that could be almost anything. So like, put a scope around, what is the eShop, what's the market niche, and then jump into the
eShop is basically similar to Alzat says it or Koshik says it or something, where it has basically everything, but they have a more specialized area in like outdoor stuff like grilling or pools and like above ground pools and stuff like that, or like saunas or things like that. Yeah.
And now back to the problem.
Oh yeah, so what I was saying, the problem was that on the website, if you go there, there are some categories that are just not fully there. You might not you're looking for something and then you can't find it because they haven't finished it. But they put the link of the category there. So then you end up going to like another website because you can't find what you're looking for. Another website, for example, Azad, that has everything there, that they don't like load up something that they don't have yet.
Right. Do we have anybody in the class who's done any web eShop development that might know the kind of problem that Sasha's describing? No? Nobody. Is Shaw on? I don't see him.
Anything but not eShop.
Say that again, Maria?
Anything really, but not eShop, never.
Anything but not eShop.
It's very like specific, I think.
Yeah. I'm sorry, somebody spoke up?
No, you were talking about eShop. I've never had any sort of experience with it, actually.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So this is something that we're going to get into this quite a bit later, but the concept around e-business is kind of infinite. I mean, you could just imagine that you could be, and we're actually going to talk about this today in terms of the underlying technologies. How do you get all that content in your shop? And how do you manage that? Imagine, I used an example before. I was talking about Petrovini, and I talked about, you know, this old lady running around with her little notepad. I think it was like the second day we talked, and she's updating. She sees, oh, we don't have enough milk, or, you know, we don't have enough eggs, or we don't have enough avocados, or whatever. And like, she's going to make a little list, and then she's probably going to run out the door and give it to her husband and say, hey, you know, go to the distribution center and go buy this shit and bring it back so we can put it on the shelves. And I mean, that's how business is done at its most basic level. And then you think about like an e-shop, and you sort of, how did the avocado get in the e-shop? How did the eggs get in the e-shop? And what kind of egg are they this brand of 8 in a pack? Or is it that brand that is bio and they're 4 in a pack? And then what's the price? Is that price today's price, or because I bought it last week and there was an egg shortage, so the price went up? So am I passing that price on, or did I just keep my same retail price like an idiot, and now every time I sell eggs, I'm losing money? I mean, but you have to think about all the data elements associated to a specific content. And Sasha's talking about how many products, Sasha, does your company sell?
How many products?
How many products?
The total amount, I don't know the total amount of.
Ballpark. 100, 1,000, 10,000, 20,000?
Probably several hundreds, yeah.
Several hundred. Does anybody in this class have any experience in retail sales?
I have an experience with eShop.
With an eShop,
Yes.
And what kinds of products?
eShop developer, but eShop manager. Clothes, women clothes.
And how many items did you have?
Well, I don't know total amount right now, but I think like thousands, 4,000.
Yeah. And is it a big eShop?
No, it's just one brand eShop, so it's not that big. It's actually a very small one, I would say, comparing to others.
Right. And when you talk about items, and back me up if I ever lie, you guys are always welcome to say bullshit, and that I'm not telling the truth. It's called a SKU, right?
SKU like what?
I don't know if I think you use that terminology here in Europe. We do in the United States. Every unique product has a SKU. I mean, Universal Product Code?
SKU, it's like how it's like a code. Each product has a code, right?
Right.
Yes, each product has several codes, like EON and SKU, yes.
Right. And a SKU, SKU, a SKU. So this is a medium shirt by a particular manufacturer.
No, yeah, SKU, for example, you have one shirt, it has one SKU, but this shirt can be in 2 colors and like 5 sizes. So each size has its own EON, but SKU is only one.
See how much data multiplies out. This is Sasha's problem.
It's usually the problem with the database. Sometimes, like we had a problem as well. Sometimes in our database, we have more than we actually have. Like a mistake.
This is a great example. So we talk about data integrity. If you ever hear that word, it's not, are you truthful? Personally, is the database truthful? If there are 4 blue medium shirts with these particular buttons in inventory, and I walk over to the shelf or maybe they're in the back room, but they need to be there. So how are we managing this database of information? So that's the specific term we use to manage the information, the data in a database. And then how do we get the data into the database? How are we managing moves, adds, deletes, changes to the database? Because maybe I'm a clerk and I went and picked it up and I found there was a rip in it. And then so I put it in the back because I wanted to send it back to the manufacturer or the distributor, or maybe I took it from the counter and I sold it, or maybe I also have an e-shop and somebody from my e-shop bought it. Is my database updated in a frequency real time so that everybody sees the truth? Everybody now that is one issue, but Sasha actually has a different issue. Their firm doesn't get the data in the database. All of the product information isn't even in the database. And so what we want to think about, and this is a very common problem. This is really in the first wave where this was a problem. So what would we do? We just hire more people. We hire more people to put all the data in the database. And in the second wave, we learned that that data already exists somewhere. And here is one of the cardinal sins of information technology applied to e-commerce or anywhere else, but e-commerce especially: never enter data twice. What does that mean? And we'll talk about this more in this class, but this is a great setup for the rest of the class and even today's conversation. Go find out where that data is. Here's kind of a simple example. If you have somebody's contact information in your phone or your email system, what monkey in this class is going to retype their email ID every time you send them an email? Raise your hand. No, nobody's going to do that because you're not idiots. And if you did it, you would do it once, and as soon as a friend saw you, they would say, "You're the dumbest person on the planet." And then they would show you, and you'd never do it again. And this e-commerce, this life cycle of data is kind of the same thing. And I would say, I'm not a consultant for Sasha, but if I were called in to look at their operation, I would say, "Sasha, who supplies you all of your stuff that you want to sell?" And she would say, "Well, it's probably these 5 companies, maybe, or these 4 companies, or it could be 100, doesn't matter." And I would say, "Really? Well, let's go talk to them and find a representative from their information systems department, and let's find out where that data lives. And I'm going to do a data extract from their information system. I'm going to suck it out of their system, and I'm going to load it into my system. And I'm not going to do it once. I'm probably, because they probably have, if they're doing anything beyond minimal business, they probably have an information system that has the capability to technically communicate back and forth, whether it's, and this is the crudest form, a periodic update of an extract that they send it to your system, or probably they have an EDI, electronic data interchange. You'll see that acronym later, EDI, or an API, application programming interface, where your application and their application talk together. So all of that data goes from their system into your system, and Sasha doesn't have this problem anymore. Because Sasha right now, they're throwing people at it. I don't know that to be true, but I'm guessing they're throwing people at trying to do this, and they just don't have enough people or money or resources or some combination that can effectively keep the database updated. Am I right?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Good thing I'm teaching the class, huh? I know a little bit about something. So this is a great example, and it's universal. I asked you guys who has experience with retail, but what I just described to you is no different than anything. It's all the same. I'm gonna pick on somebody else. Diana, are you with us?
Yes.
Tell us about yours.
No, wait, I already forget. I think it was Samsung.
Good memory. It's yours. My page says it was Samsung.
Yeah.
What about them?
Well, I was writing about weakness. Weakness was after sales service, something like that, and the solution was to invest in human resource management. So to hire more professional employees, for example, to their service centers. And if they would improve their service and support to a high level of responsiveness, that would really help them to make more loyal customers and to make them want to come back to their brand.
Okay, so if actually you said two things, you alluded to the second thing. So one is investing in HR, and the second one was also investing in an improved online customer service and support system. Yeah.
Yes.
So how, do any of you have any experiences with going to a website and a chat bot launches and says, "Hey, you have a problem?" or "Hey, can I help you?"
Yes, yes, of course.
Yeah, almost all of us have by now. This is a fairly recent phenomenon. The last few years, chat bots have really kind of cranked up because it's a plugin. I mean, I say this all the time, but I mean, some things you have to be an idiot not to apply technology in a particular way. And like these, they're everywhere. So if you don't see it on a website, the owner's off smoking crack or something, because it's so easy to just add this simple technology to a website. Now, I know people are busy doing 100 things, but the point is, especially Samsung, and actually Samsung site has this, what do you get? What's the benefit of that? And this is where you go back to the slide of the review when you talk about like what's the business model? What's the motivation for doing that? So anybody can answer this if you could think about it. What would the person at Samsung think about when they were thinking about, hey, I need to go spend some money on improving my online customer service capabilities and experience? What's the first thing that person should be thinking about? Okay, I am not going to answer this question. Abdel.
Can you say it again, please?
Yeah. So the Samsung CEO and board of directors just heard, Diana, from you, that they have a poor excuse of an online customer service capability? What's the first thing that that person had better be able to articulate in that boardroom?
Maybe first they need to start with improving their site.
Are you talking about user experience and user interface, like those
No.
two?
No, I'm at the business strategy level. What are, I don't know if I did this before. So I will do one thing before I go back to you and make you answer the question, which will very highly suggest what the answer to the question is. Did I say, and I'm sorry, I can't remember this. What's the basic reason businesses what's the purpose for business?
Make profit.
Who said that?
Jana.
Yana, exactly. How do you make profit? What's the E equals MC square math? And by the way, it's really easy, so don't make it confusing.
You provide services and products to clients.
And from that, you get
Revenue and profit.
Stop. Revenue, great. So business is revenue
And costs.
And costs.
Costs.
Exactly. Hang on one second.
Project manager.
You can. Revenue minus expenses equals profit.
Ah.
Oh, that's our E equals MC square of business. I know it's terribly complicated. It's hard to remember, whatever, right? I know this sounds almost silly because it's so simple, but everything you do is, Yana was right, it's to generate profit, but you don't generate profit. You have to do, I mean, you generate it, but how do you do it? I'm gonna go back to you. You
Sell products. You do the revenue. You just like.
Yeah, but what do you do? They come and give you money, but you
solve some problems.
Reduce.
you spend money, right?
Yeah, but where are you going to
part.
spend the money?
The expense part. I know this is, it sounds crazy, right? You spend money. That's the first thing. You spend money because you have to spend money to make money. That's a cliche, right?
So
But it's true.
does that mean like buying? It's like buying things because you're spending money. Where are you spending them on?
You're buying, investing. I have HR resources. I have information systems. I have research and development. I have my operations, my logistics. Maybe I have a retail store. Maybe I have an e-commerce site. All those things cost money. The only reason, if I'm a business, that I'm spending money is because I need to before I can make money. And again, I know revenue minus expenses equals profit is like, duh. You know, I mean, you don't even do that in your finance class because you have all these fancy spreadsheets and you're spending all your time filling out all the details, but that's exactly what you're doing. Now I'm going to go back to the question. Revenue minus expenses equals profit. This person goes into the boardroom and says, I need to invest in an improvement in my customer support experience. What is that board member going to ask them?
How much is it going to cost?
Why do we need that?
Exactly. And what are you going to say?
To build loyal customers,
To increase customer
returning customers.
satisfaction.
Increase the profit.
Who said that?
What?
Benjamin
Benjamin,
said that?
me? Yeah.
But yes, but how? What you're almost there. You only have three things to talk about: revenue, expenses, profit. So you're going into the board and you're saying, you know what? I can make you more money. I can increase your profit. But you're in the board, so you're not in there brainstorming. You better be there with like to have something to say. What are you gonna what are you gonna say? I'm not asking you in this conversation right now to give me the exact answer for Samsung's problem, but I want you to describe, at least in general terms, what that person had better be prepared to say when they walk in that room.
Customer service management is one of the most important factors of the revenue minus expenses equals profit. CRM.
Could be related, but you really have to stay at the revenue minus expenses equals profit level.
That they are ready to increase their expenses, therefore their revenue will increase, and then they can like just set the formula, and then they will have the profit at the end. Like they can just increase some expenses to fix this issue, therefore keeping the customer, like hooking or grabbing the customer, therefore continuous interactions.
Ding, ding, ding. Exactly. Exactly. The only thing I would do, Abdel, is I would bump it up just to be a little more specific, is to say, if we spent $100,000 providing this particular capability, then we would not lose $1.5 million in revenue because customers disappear. And we think if we improve this, we would in fact get another $1 million because prospects, not customers, would also come to this same page and be affected by this customer service. And then therefore, we would anticipate more revenues. So now I go into the boardroom and they, at the end of the day, they're just making money. So I'm saying, here's the proposal. $150,000, improve this, and we get $2.5 million, potentially. Of course, nothing's a sure bet, but that's the business case. That's the foundation of, and this is why it doesn't matter whatever all of you want to do when you leave here, you have to think that way, period. Period. Or your boss is going to think you're an idiot, or you're running your own show and you're going to go out of business. Why? Because if you start projects on things ambiguous as, oh, it'll make my customer happy, of course we want to make our customer happy, but what's it worth to us? What do we get back? It's a tangible cost benefit analysis, at least in a hypothetical scenario that I can test. I can do that. We'll talk later in this class about A/B testing. I actually can push that into a very specific target market niche and see, in fact, did that work? And you guys, hopefully you took your statistics classes, so you know that if I randomly sampled 1,200 people, I could actually predict how millions of people will behave. It's crazy, right? But the mathematicians have proven over and over again that that's exactly what statistics is. With 96.8% confidence, this is going to be the outcome because I did a random sample on 1,200 people within this community of 1 million. All of these activities, every one of your projects, and you're going to do this in your own project eventually that you're going to present as your final semester project, but you're going to have to think about that. So why am I doing that? I'm only doing that, and I don't mean to be like so callous, like to make money because I'm greedy, but that's what I'm in business to do. I mean, if I'm Mother Teresa and I'm doing it to save lives, then that would be my revenue, if you will. Here, Mother Teresa, if you spend I know she's dead now, but if she was still alive, I would say, Mother Teresa, if you give me $100,000 and I could invest in a website that gave people in Bangladesh access to information about how to improve, their access to water, that it would result in, 1 million lives saved or something. And Mother Teresa would probably say, hey, that's a pretty good idea. Then she'd go to your cousin banker and say, here, donate my $100,000 because I don't have any money, but I want to save 1 million lives. But this whole cost benefit analysis is at the core of e-commerce. And I didn't ask you to do that in these projects, but that's the nature of this activity. The next layer down. I always have to say, if I'm going to invest in an initiative, I have to know what my anticipated return is going to be for that investment. And remember your finance classes, ROI, return on investment. If I'm going to spend $100, I better get more than $100 back. And then this is related to portfolio management, because I have many opportunities to do things, many options, many projects. It's called portfolio management. Then I just prioritize them. And sometimes you look at sites or you look at businesses and you go, well, I don't know why they don't do this one thing. I mean, it's so stupid and it's simple. And why wouldn't they just do that? And I think you can come to one of two conclusions. One is they are stupid, or two, that they, in their own portfolio management, they've just not gotten down to the level that doing that one thing, gives them a big enough return. I would go to Sasha's company and I would say, those products that the data is not available for them to sell on their website, take the products off. I mean, with all due respect, how stupid is that to put a product up and not have the product detail behind it? It looks like you're like a half-ass company that just started up last week. You either do it right or don't do it at all. And because if they scale back and they just do what they're doing really well, then their customers and their brand will be perceived as something that matches what their expectations are. So customers come to the business with an expectation, and if it's met, then they're happy. And as we know, as she said, when it's not met, boop, they bounce off to another site.
So can you know?
So you're basically, go ahead.
So can you kind of see this as like maybe opposite of opportunity costs? So like you won't lose something else if you invest in this?
Could you describe it as an opportunity cost? Well,
opposite of opportunity cost.
Yeah, opportunity cost is a very specific thing. Opportunity cost says you can do this, or you can do this, yeah, or you can do this, or not do that. And if you don't do that, then that's an opportunity cost. That's the cost of like not doing something. So in this particular case, I think it's more of what should you invest your energy in, and then what's the return on that particular activity. This is not so much opportunity, although you could include, I don't mean to make it any more complicated, and the concept of opportunity cost would be more complicated. I would just say flatly, if you have products and services that you're trying to sell, then you need to complete the activity, do all of the expenses related to that so that you can get all the revenue that potentially would result from all of those expenses. But if you're doing expenses half-ass and you're not completing the activity, then you're never going to get the revenue. And in fact, you might result in more dissatisfied customers and losing more business.
So, sorry, I'm sorry for interruption. So you're basically saying, in such a case, the person has to go to the boardroom to estimate the cost for solution, right? Therefore, evaluating the outcome that will happen, like a project manager or something.
Well, I mean, this is into the weeds a little bit, but actually it would be anybody who's coming to the board to make a presentation would be representing the resources that would gather that data. that would be able to say, here, we've identified this problem, and this problem is costing us this amount of business, either lost business because people are going away and not buying, coming back, or incremental business. And then, so typically it would be someone from operations, it would be customer service, it'd be somebody from sales and marketing, excuse me, it would be that collection of people that would be feeding the information that would say, here's the summary, and to include information systems people because they would identify the costs.
Like
But
project
I don't really,
coordinators.
yeah, so this
Similar to
person is the business analyst representing to the board, here's your choice, and here's the cost, and here's the benefit. Now you board, you go make a decision.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, I kind of didn't plan to go into so much detail, but that's actually, that's a good exercise because in my mind, in my personal experience, I think this is what students miss most. And it's not your fault, it's just pure experience, is that when I went into business and when I go into businesses, I often see this fragmented approach. Somebody's talking about customer service, or somebody's talking about some logistical problem, or somebody's talking about even like a database update. And this is why you guys are paying UNYP so much money, is hopefully so people like me tell you, this is what you should be paying attention to. It's, I mean, that's a lot of money to pay for revenue minus expenses equals profit. But I'm telling you that when you understand that at that level, and then you apply your education into the details of how do I get revenue? And then you think about market segmentation, marketing activities, awareness. We'll talk about some of that stuff later and apply it. Or the expenses side, the operations. I need all these pieces and parts. I have to invest in all these things. And only when I have these together, thoughtfully organized, and that's why I present to you value chain of activities. When you organize that stuff thoughtfully, then you've got a rock and roll business. And then when you do have a problem, you can zoom in and say, oop, that's where that problem is. And you know what? I've seen a problem like that over in this other area of the business, and that's how I solved it over here. And maybe I can apply that solution over here. Maybe I can leverage technology. Maybe technology is not going to help me. But I start to have at least a pragmatic approach to problem solving that I'm just telling you from my own experience, it's universal. I can apply this to anything. I mean, that's why I say the Mother Teresa thing. It's not a mistake. Anything in the world. I have one of my best friends growing up works for the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia, and his job is to save lives around the world. And I talked to him about what does he do to invest in programs and projects around the world. He's responsible for a few $100 million in projects, and he thinks about it exactly the same way. How many lives can I save, and what are my expenses? And then I look around and I say, is that a resource issue? Is it, I mean, better doctors or better nurses or distribution systems, and often it involves transferring of information. And so shockingly, unshockingly, e-commerce ends up becoming a big part of how he can execute projects more efficiently and effectively, saving, and I know this sounds crazy, millions of dollars, because he doesn't have tens of thousands of people around the world chasing things around, just like Sasha was talking about with their database problem of product information in their e-shop. It's the same problem. It's just reconfigured a different way. And let me go back to that. The notes that I took from all of your projects, you guys, again, appear so far, unless you're bluffing me, appear to be brighter than previous classes. I risk saying that, I guess, but you seem to really understand this, and hopefully this last 10 minutes or so off it is really the backbone of all of the work that you'll do in this class. Of course, it's e-commerce and the technologies and blah, blah, blah. And you're going to get some more technology in a little bit for most of this class. But that's, if you don't lead with a business disposition, then the probability of failing or wasting your money is huge. So I'm not going to do any more of those. Is that, did anybody have any questions about that? Or let me move this around here, maybe that'd be better. Hopefully that was helpful. I really, write that down. Revenue minus expenses equals profit. Okay, we need to schedule a makeup class. I'm going to take a swing at doing this kind of just by talking. Is there a particular day in time that's actually, I'm going to do this first. This is my idea. For this makeup class, I'm going to go through 2 chapters today. And they're really kind of techno chapters. This is chapter 2 and chapter 3. And some of you, this is going to be like, what I know, I get it. I don't have to spend any more time talking about it. And so what I thought is, I want to make the makeup class where I'll dive down deeper into these 2 chapters for those of you who might either struggle with the topic or just anything in those 2 chapters that you want to ask me more questions about. So that being said, if I use that makeup class as a way to go through what I'm about to talk about for the rest of the class, you can decide if you think it would be valuable for you. And then you might be a little more forceful about making sure that I picked a time that was convenient for you. So that said, what I'll try to do is, and please remind me, is before we get to the end of this discussion today, let's try to see if we can't pick a date and time. Mondays, Tuesdays, whatever. I'm generally pretty flexible. So we'll talk about that later. We have some speaker options coming up. Just to share some names with you. You can separately tell me what if one is more important, or if there's a specific topic you'd like for them to present on as part of their overview. I'll give you a summary right now. So Tomasz Bartek is a UNYP MBA graduate. He has a history in technical infrastructure and project management. And then after getting his MBA, he moved into a marketing position. And now he's the marketing executive for this firm, Vaše Chočky. I don't know if I said that right, but is that pretty bad? Thanks, Maria, for laughing at me. But it means your lenses. It's they do lens, they use by glasses and all the, whatever that universe, you know, whether they be frames or lenses or eye contacts or contact solution or cleaning, blah, 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 all that stuff. Well, it ends up being a multi-million-dollar business, and he's responsible, he's the executive responsible for marketing, which essentially he's the guy. So he creates the marketing plan, what different regions in Europe they market against. As you might imagine, looking at the name, it's Czech, and they do a lot of business outside of the Czech Republic. So they're in the process of rebranding and changing their name. And so he plans to talk about that as well. But he's a these guys, he worked with them after they got past the first level of kind of being an e-shop startup. And so he knows everything. He knows everything about Sasha, not about you, Sasha, but about e-shops and the problems of having real-time data, we call it dynamic content, on the website, and then what's the frequency of the updates. They have all of their suppliers from all over, to include China and India, and how do they get that data into their system real time so that information becomes available for their target audience. So he does marketing initiatives, target market in the different regions, some focused on German, some focused on Italian, some focused on Czech, of course. And then he has the resources on his team that develop within those marketing campaigns which platforms they execute on. So whether it be Google AdWords or Facebook or the Instagram, which is related to the Facebook platform. But so he has very specific hands-on experience in managing through all of those platforms. And he's talked with previous classes of mine, and he talks about the challenges that they have. And not surprisingly, he starts with, this is our business objective. This is what we as an organization have as a target objective. And then he talks about how he leverages technology to achieve those objectives, to include having KPIs, key performance indicators, as they execute specific tactics, so that if they're not incrementally achieving their milestones, that they can stop, readjust, and go forward or cancel. And so he talks about that in a very real life mode. Darren is my little brother, not little brother, younger brother. All my brothers are taller than me. He's been through a number of startups. He's in Silicon Valley in Northern California. And I've asked him if he would come and talk to us just about his different experiences. It's more broad because he's worked for, I think, maybe 6 or 8 different firms. One of them you would certainly know is LinkedIn. He was the director of sales for LinkedIn in the United States. And this B2B, he's really, his specialty is in human resources and B2B startups in Silicon Valley. But what would be of most value is for him to articulate, how did they get in this business, each of the different businesses, what's the value proposition, and then how do they leverage technology, because this is all Silicon Valley techno startup stuff. And then what are they investing their time in? And then also I wanted him to share some of the horror stories. You know, you jump in there and you think this is a great idea, but then as you execute, you run into problems. What are some of those problems that he could share with you guys, so that you're probably going to go into situations that it might not be the same like a startup, but maybe you're going to go work for a company and you might, launch an initiative, which in my mind is like a startup. Did you achieve the benefit you anticipated by spending the money, expenses, on that particular initiative? And so he can talk about those experiences. The next is Radhi Sahi Levesque. She's a great friend of mine. She is the COO of The Real Real. Any of you familiar with that? Online luxury goods. They just did their initial public offering last year, over $1 billion in market value. And this is a great story. And it's related to the book in that her boss, the CEO, she and her boss started The Real Real. And her boss was the president, CEO, and founder of Pets.com. Remember that story? That wonderful disaster story it's in the book about they invested millions of dollars to build a website to sell pet food and pet related products. And it was horribly bad. It was like a perfect first wave of e-commerce, sad story. And however, her name is Julie. Julie came back and she went on to work at a number of companies because she's worth so much, because she learned how not to do it. And now she's running The Real, and they're doing very well. It's a luxury goods consignment shop. And it's very interesting. One of you talked about cryptocurrency in your project. Who's that? Shaw?
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah. Trust. This is about trust.
Yeah.
If I'm going to sell a $10,000 watch or a $20,000 watch on the internet, who the hell is going to buy that from me?
Well,
Nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because you don't have
nobody.
rating, and most probably people will not trust you, and they will buy from like a web store like eBay or Amazon or like Rolex.com.
Right. Turns out that everybody who you know, who's probably worth millions in the United States, know of this site. They've done, and she will come and tell the story about how they started from the kitchen. They were she and Julie were in the kitchen, packaging products in boxes, calling people like Shaq O'Neal and saying, hey, would you be a brand ambassador, blah, blah, the startup. Every celebrity you could imagine, they have solicited. Maybe they have them, maybe they don't, but they're working with these. I went to their New York City launch 2 years ago, and it was unbelievable. And it's to the point that, Shaw, you pointed out that some people want a physical, we call them brick and mortar shop, to be paired with their online presence to give some more credibility. So in the event, it's unlikely, but in the event, people want to know they can just go and see somebody. So Roddy can come and talk about that. And the last guest speaker is Marek Hozak, and he's the founder and CEO of Grost. He was a marketing and e-commerce or e-marketing specialist, and he started a firm that we're going out and doing consulting. And then he thought over time, he said, hey, you know what? Why don't we just automate what we're doing and put it together in a system and essentially create these e-marketing tools so that small and medium-sized businesses that they don't understand the internet, they know how to get online and get an email, but they don't understand really how to do a Facebook campaign, as an example, or a Google AdWords campaign. So what they've done is they've automated that process so that, just like me and you, very simple user interface, we could just go in and enter the key information about that product or service, and boom, outside on the other side, and automatically, as they say, it populates the internet with ad campaigns. And so he would come and explain that. Mark is a very unusual character in that he is both really clever on the business side all the way down to he can code things. So, and he can demonstrate to you specifically how, for example, we can implement tools on our website that catch and record consumer behavior. So I know exactly where on the screen somebody is spending their time and whether they're wasting their time up here on the right-hand corner, when in fact down here in the left-hand corner, as the creator of this online system, we know that's where they should be spending their time. That might be too abstract as a description, but the point is that he has all the specific tools and techniques to manage those environments. So I'll come back to you if you guys have any. I just wanted to introduce them to you generally, and if you have any specific of your own experiences. I think you doing your homework for me gives me a better idea of kind of where in the world you find yourself. So that helps me inform them about you so that whatever they have to say is tailored to you as an audience. The next thing, when we come back, we'll take a break in a few minutes. I want to introduce the semester project to you, so at least be noodling around in your head. And there is a very short activity to kick that off. And I warn you about a quiz in your future, probably next week. And the intent behind a quiz is to not harass you, but to challenge you to see if you think you're keeping up with the class. These are the questions that I'm going to ask you on the midterm. So here's an example of that without such a big penalty as screwing up the midterm. So if you screw up the quiz, then you know that you're not paying attention to the details enough and you need to kind of crank it up a notch. Or if you do well, then you said, oh, cool, I should do okay on the midterm. And as long as you keep doing whatever you're doing, you'll do pretty well.
A quick
All right,
question,
so
please. Just before the break, we're going to return back to the quiz topic, right? And then after the break.
I'm not going to return to a quiz topic. No, I'm just warning you that next week I'm giving you a quiz.
Yeah, so is it possible to know what are the materials? Is it only the first wave and second wave?
No. It'll be everything through today, to include today.
Okay. So we can take the break and then we can.
Okay. All right, I'll see you in 15 minutes, 4:30. Ciao. All right, welcome back. I think we're time to play some more. Oops. Try to get everybody. They told me to take attendance. Well, not that we're grading on attendance, but just to make sure that you're who's here and who's not. So here we are. Introduction of 40% of your grade. Hopefully that's motivation enough to have you pay attention. The simple objective of this project is to go through the process of everything that I'm telling you. Part of it will be just kind of knowledge or information that you're going to show me that you understand in the form of these quizzes and activities and the midterm. But my experience is that it really clicks in your head when you work on a project and apply the things that we're talking about to something that's interesting to you. So the project I'll go through the details, but it's going to be 3 or 4 people per project team. You pick your teammates. I don't know you well enough, and I want you to pick who you think you can productively work with, and you will pick the project. I want something that is interesting to you and your teammates collectively. So in advance, I will warn you that don't let a teammate drive you to a particular project that you're not interested in. I mean, you have to eventually pick one, but I suggest that you at least collaborate before you have a dominant team member kind of force a topic that's not interesting onto you, because the reality is that the more interested you are in that topic, and maybe you're not going to be interested at the beginning and you become interested, but if you're interested, then it will stick to your brain matter more effectively. And then you'll be able to apply it after you leave the university. That's my belief. So here we go. So here's the project objective. It's to identify a business opportunity and apply the key concepts of e-commerce and marketing introduced in this course. You don't have to worry about what exactly those things are, but you can imagine what they are. We will go through those specific activities that I want you to apply to this project as we're going through this class. So it's not something you're going to be doing in the background. It's something we're going to be doing in the class and during the class. I would highly recommend that as, for example, we have these guest speakers come through, you think about your project and I'm not going to say cheat, but leverage them to help solve or suggest how they might solve the problems that exist within your project. I think that would be very clever. I mean, use me. I am not standing on the outside of this as a judge. I am part of each one of your teams. So I'm certainly not going to jump up and give you an answer before you've thought through it, but I will be there to help. I want every team to get an A. There's no reason why every team shouldn't get an A. Now, as a caveat, not everybody on the team gets the same score as the team. Why? Because sometimes people kind of just go along and don't do any work. And for those of you who find yourself always doing all the work, you're welcome. I'm not giving credit for if I can identify some folks who are not pulling their fair share. So that's a little motivation that you do your fair share and that I don't get emails in the middle of the night complaining about, member number 2 or number 3 not returning text messages or doing their work or never committing to any work or blah, blah, blah. You know how that goes. But here it is. But I want, going back to the project, I want you to think about, and you did this exercise already this last week, but you just did it for something that you were generally familiar with. It actually could be one of those projects. You could find that, in fact, those situations and those projects have enough content that it could be your semester project. I don't think there's any project in the homework assignment activities that I read that I would not think could be a good project. But I'll let you guys work that out amongst yourselves. The opportunity may be a new venture creating a new market for an existing product or a new delivery method competing in an existing market. I don't mean to confuse you with those words. The point is that it's any opportunity. It's any, what can I do? It could be a new business, could be an existing business, but how are you taking that entity or organization and identifying either one of two things? How do I increase revenue or decrease expenses? And some activities or some opportunities could be both. And I say that in the next bullet. There are infinite opportunities to do things better, faster, cheaper. Find the best one you can think of and develop it using rational business planning logic, considering the benefit to the organization. And here it is, E = MC squared again. You're adding value that allows you to maybe charge more or increase revenue, and or you're reducing costs. And both of those things will result in increased profit, which is your organizational overall objective. Unless you're a nonprofit organization and you have other outcomes, as I gave you the Mother Teresa example, saving lives, adopting puppies, whatever. It can be internal or external of an enterprise. Often some people challenge me in that they say that my disposition is oriented towards startups. And I don't know if you've picked up that vibe in how I speak about things, but I really do think whether you're working inside an organization or outside an organization, we're always thinking in startup mode. We're always thinking in, this is an initiative. And the initiative, if I'm being intrapreneurial, as they say, like I work for IBM, I should still have that same level of excitement and energy to finding new business opportunities as if I were also outside of an organization and I was starting something from scratch. The only requirement is that you prove that it will create economic value within a reasonable period of time. And I say use your own sense of reasonableness for scale of the project in terms of like payback, if you're familiar with that in finance. So if I spend $100,000 on something, I would expect to get paid back within 1, 2, 3 years. And this is not a business plan, but it's kind of crudely, roughly like a business plan. I just want you to be organizing your thoughts and your work around this idea that it always bubbles up to the same thing we talked about at the beginning of this class. If I presented this to a board, or if I'm starting a new venture myself, I can see I'm spending this money and I'm creating this product or service or whatever because I can see that I'm going to be making money from it. And making the money might be related to a problem where I'm simply not losing money. I'm fixing something so I'm not losing money that results in increased profits. So you can look at this. That's why it's infinite. There are many ways to consider what the opportunity is. The final deliverables, you're going to be doing a presentation. You're going to create a document that will summarize the activities that we're going to go through. They're typically 5 or 6 activities. It depends on the semester and how it goes as to how many we get done, but typically it's 5 or 6. You'll have that as a document that represents the work that you've done, but we're not waiting until the end of the semester. You're going to be doing and submitting each activity as you're doing it. And in fact, today I'm assigning the first activity. It's not so complicated, but it does require some thinking. What is your business idea? The final presentation you'll do as a team, presenting each of those principal activities in a 30-minute presentation at the end of the semester. So that'll be on December 17th, which is the scheduled final for the class. So during that time slot. I put these suggested thoughts in here, and I restate this often, and I'll keep restating it. Don't get lost in the details. Keep focused on the problem and the opportunity. I should say problem or opportunity. And use your other skills and experiences in the solution. And finally, keep it simple. This is why I go back to this revenue minus expenses equals profit, because if you can characterize anything you're doing in that very simple math problem, then you're fine. And I find often people get lost in the weeds where they're talking about something and they can't summarize it in those simple terms. And when they're lost in the weeds, I would tell them, go away and go keep thinking about it. And then when you can articulate it in those terms, revenue minus expenses equals profit, then you've probably understood the problem well. So here's your first activity. It's find a business or organization, could be a nonprofit. Develop a high-level outline of project elements with preliminary notes. Really, it's just high level. Just what's the business name, or make up a name if you're thinking about starting something, and describe what is the business. You know, is it an e-shop that sells technology in the Czech region or the Central European region or throughout Europe? Is it a luxury goods consignment site? Is it a big organization like SAP, or excuse me, Samsung, and you're zooming in on this problem related to customer service? But just know, and this is where I would try to get you to go stay away from large enterprises. Large enterprises are very complex, and your access to information about the scope of the problem and the potential benefit of a solution is sometimes difficult to get your hands on. So I find, just for the sake of this class, that it's better to try to grab a hold of something that's smaller. Sometimes some of you might have family businesses, or you might work for a small company, or you might be starting something yourself. But I find it's better when you grab a real existing entity and you have access to a general manager or the owner that you can speak to directly about what problems they're having. How does that problem impact their ability to make money? And if they had a solution, e-commerce specifically, what could they predict or hypothesize as would be the benefit of that solution? And then for you as a project, you'll develop that solution for them roughly. You know, we're not coding, we're not doing anything like that, but we're going to go through the process and methodology for how would you develop and analyze an e-commerce solution for a particular business opportunity. No big surprise, use value chain of activities and SWOT to help identify the opportunity. And even if you're talking to a small business owner, often they don't have a business degree or they don't have a formal education. They're just successful business people. So they're just doing it. So what you might have to do along the way is to, as you're interviewing them or talking to them, is to translate what they're saying into these models and methodologies, SWOT and value chain of activities. One leader, we're going to be submitting all of this in Slack. One team leader is to create a Slack channel with the team name and submit all activity in that Slack channel by next week. So anything that's due, it's just like everything else, it's due by 11:59 on Wednesday, the day before the class, unless I say different, but this one is the same. And please, for the file naming convention, follow this so we can all see this. Well, look at this, we already have a team. Shah, UNYP eCom Fall 2020, and then the team name and activity 1.0 outline. This will be the first activity, and then as you do each activity, it'll go 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. And then probably some of them I'm going to have you do over again. Probably this activity, I think historically I'm almost always redo this activity. Not redo it, but fine tune it. Or as you get into it, you'll find that, oh, well, maybe that's not a good idea. Or maybe just the way that we've thought about it isn't really, and I'll give you a very strong opinion about what I think, because I can predict a bit as to how that might go through the rest of the semester. And I put in highlight here, note it's a starting place. It will likely change a lot during the next few weeks, so don't get hung up on the details, but at least start with the same position in your head as you did this last homework activity, just now with more specificity and possibly in a different topic, whatever you guys choose as a team, and then knowing that you're going to be working on that for the rest of this semester. So that's it. Let me pause for a second and ask if you have any questions about that.
I do have a question, quick question, please. The convention, what is the, like, I don't understand, like once we create the channel, each team will create their own channel. So every time we want to type something, we have to write the UNYP eCommerce fall 2020.
No. That's a file. So you're going to create a file, whether it's a PDF or a doc file. That's the name of the file.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all. The reason why is I'm thinking ahead to the life cycle of how this is going to work. I'm going to download this onto my PC, and then I'm going to put it in e-learning. And I don't want yours being confused with another team's confused with another team's. So it allows me to keep everything organized by file name.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other preguntas? No? Okay. Well, I don't think I started a Slack channel for projects. If I didn't, I will. And I'm going to put this in the Slack channel for the semester project. And then I'm going to put everything that we're doing in that channel that's for everybody. So you'll see the activities there, so we can all go to that one place. What you're submitting, and if we have any private dialogue between your teams and I, then we'll do that in the your specific channel. But there'll be a common channel for the project where we can have, I will post all the slides, and then any other future activities or any group discussion amongst the whole team will be in that channel. And then anything specific to your project, that conversation will be in your team's specific channel. But I would appreciate if you guys would just be thoughtful about questions you ask. And if it's kind of a generic question, put it in the common channel so that everyone benefits by the question and how I answer it. It's okay if you don't, because typically if it rings a bell to me that I think that everyone would benefit from it, I'll typically cut and paste it and put it into the group channel. But if you just started there, it would be it'd be easier. Cool.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course, that's what they pay me to answer.
So I want to ask you a question about the Slack itself. It says there that I have only 10 days trial free period, which ends in October somewhere, and then I'll have to pay for it.
Right. So just give me your credit card number and I'll make sure that gets paid.
Okay, so I'll have to pay for it. Just want to
No. I tell you, this is annoying the shit out of me. Not your question. Slack. Why? What they do, this is bad business practice to me. I can't take away because I have to get through these other slides. But this is an example. I think one has to be ethical, and it's a branding thing. If they are spamming you with a message that says, your trial's about to end. It's a free platform for basic services. We'll talk about this later when we get to selling to consumers. It's a freemium model. You use it for free, and if you want these improved services, then you give them your credit card. But I think it's really unethical when they spam you and make you feel like you're going to lose something if you don't give them money, as opposed to, I think a legitimate business practice is to say, hey, thanks for using our service. If you want these additional services, give us your credit card, but if not, keep using it for free. I mean, that's an honest, transparent marketing tactic, sales tactic. And what they do just infuriates the shit out of me. But what I like about, and I told you this before about Slack, it's just a solution, right? So we collectively in this e-commerce class can more critically look at, and hopefully you bring these things up and I share with you my belief about these things, but you have your own belief. Maybe you're a greedy little bastard and you would do this all day, every day if you created your own version of Slack. And that's, you know, everyone's got their own, you know, life to live, but one should definitely understand what the trade-offs are in business tactics. And we'll talk about many other selling to consumer tactics that I find to be ethical and unethical. Yeah. So that's a good observation. So no, don't give them your credit card. And then next time you get on Google, you can give them a 1 star and say, that's nasty. You do
Okay. Okay.
Other questions? Okay. You know, their market cap is 18 billion. They don't need another 50 bucks from you. All right. Unless they're giving you service and they've earned it, and that's different. Okay, I am going to plow through these. I probably have about 60 slides on technology. And for those of you who are not technologists, let me start by saying this. And I've said this before in terms of like computers and networks and hardware and Moore's law about things getting better, faster, cheaper. They're just pieces and parts. And what's important to know for business people like us, we just need to know what those pieces and parts are. You have to memorize some of this for the midterm. And that's because things that are stored in your head, I'm not looking for some robot to like memorize shit and then blurt it back out. But the more you generally have an idea of the pieces and the parts and they're really just stuck in your head, you don't have to Google it every time to remember like how much is a gigabyte or what are network speeds, you know, is that fast, is that slow? You generally have an idea and your life just goes a lot faster. And so that's kind of what I'm shooting for here. So don't be afraid, but there will be a lot of information coming. Yeah, so yeah, Diana, stretch your neck out and get ready. Okay, here we go. And stop me anytime, but this is what mostly, if we did a makeup class, I would climb down into more detail or give you more like basic descriptions of what's important and how it gets used. Because how it gets used, I think, is the only thing that's really important. If I just, you know, told you to tell me what HTML means without it being in context, I mean, that's just stupid. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a little bit of the history of the internet. I don't care about that so much. Just you should have an idea. Packet switching networks. We talked about this before when we talked about technology, but I'm going to come back at it. Just again, that you recognize that actually this architecture of packets, little bits of information being sent around the internet. So I'm sending an email. I send all these little bits and they go all over the internet and then they come back together at the destination. This is like magic. But that architecture, it's actually an architecture that allows us to do all the shit that we do today. So you don't have to know more than what I just told you. The idea that I can take information like a picture or an email or a movie and it gets broken up into all these little pieces, all these little packets of information, and it goes all over the internet. And it's random. It's not totally random, but like it goes to that router and that router and that router, and then it all comes back to the target device, which is your laptop, and then you're streaming a Netflix video. That is packet switching, and that is very powerful architecture that simply didn't exist before the internet, not certainly for general purpose and general use. And that's what is the backbone of all the services that we're using today. What protocols, those are just languages. We've agreed that, you know, HTML, as an example, is a protocol. English is a protocol. It's a language. TCP/IP, telecommunication control point internet protocol, is a protocol. It's even in the name. And all it means is that we've agreed, everyone got to, well, not everybody, but a group of representative people got together around the world and said, hey, here's the deal. If I send a packet, this little string of bits, and it goes into this thing called the internet, that it's going to have some information around it that any of the devices around that connect all these things together will understand. The only way that works is if we all agree on the same protocol, the same language. That's all that is. And as I just suggested, we have this thing called HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, and that essentially is how do we manage the content at the browser level. So I have a browser, and how is it that I use Safari or Opera or Firefox or Chrome? How is it that I can use any of those products and I can go to a website and they all essentially look the same? It's because the content on that server is wrapped by HTML, this protocol, this language that says that content should look like this when it's presented to my user, graphical user interface. That's all. Intranets versus intranets and extranets. What are the differences? It's essentially the same. It's just networks, but it's how am I grouping them? Like an internet is you and I are on an internet. Your TCP/IP, your device. We're going up to the mothership, Zoom, and Zoom is connected to me, and got information going back and forth. On the internet, it could be an intranet. We could go to e-learning and we could open a little chat. It's an intranet because we put boundaries around it where just those who are authorized by the www.elearning.unip.cz place on the internet. It's got some access rights that keep just us connected. Options for connecting to the internet, including cost and bandwidth factors. This is important. This is back in chapter 1. This is this idea of like infrastructure. What's Maria looking at? What's Jonah looking at? I mean, you're looking at your device and your device is connected to the internet. Maybe it's a wired cable, a LAN cable, maybe it's Wi-Fi, maybe Benjamin's on his phone and maybe his phone is connected using broadband, WAN technology to get access to Zoom. And I, as a user, interested that all of you are connected equally to this content, that you're having a good experience, I'm interested to make sure that each of you have the right infrastructure to make this a good experience. And I mean, this is actually pretty challenging. The idea that we have audio and video and slides, and I've got all of you, I've got what, 20 of you all connected and all of you streaming information back and forth. This would not happen 10 years ago. You might see my face and I might be like, but. Maybe you heard every fifth word, or maybe the audio or the video cut out and the system prioritized the audio. It has that ability, it does that. Sometimes you see that happen. You keep hearing stuff, but you don't see it. But the whole point here is that we have this infrastructure connectivity requirement for particular content, and it's very important. Who's my audience? Am I in Chad? Am I in Bangladesh? Am I in Bangalore? Am I in San Francisco? What are the accessibility options for my potential end users all the way back to my server? And this is why this knowledge, or at least an awareness of infrastructure, is so important in this particular topic. Now, I've essentially gone through 50 slides by just giving you that introduction. So now I'm just going to click through the slides themselves and go back and just point out some things that you should know. And if you don't know them, then let's go over those things in the makeup class. But I don't want to drag everybody through this. So having skipped the last class, this kind of gives us an opportunity to kind of not make everybody have to go through this. We already talked about all these things in the history. Clearly, a billion domain, over a billion and counting. This is kind of, the numbers are so extraordinary, they're almost meaningless. But the point is that everything is everywhere. This concept of the Internet of Things. We talked about smart homes. We talked about your watch, maybe a pacemaker. I don't have a pacemaker. My phone, my laptop, my light switch. Now that it's a smart home, it's connected. Not my refrigerator. My coffee maker is connected. That's bizarre. Everything is connected. So that's this Internet of Things. And look at these numbers. It's like 35 billion devices. That's not a big surprise, right? My car, I think it has thousands of monitoring components, hundreds of devices, and a few that actually call out to the mothership. And so this is that everything is connected. If you're familiar with Tesla, which probably you are, the Tesla car is terribly connected to the internet. In fact, we have some security issues that maybe somebody who wanted to hack a system could go tell my Tesla to hit the brakes. You know, things, devices, components everywhere. Even my dog, I got the little puppy dog you saw, got a little chip in the back. It's an Internet of Thing. I can find my dog anywhere. History lesson. We just want to pay homage to Tim Berners-Lee. Thanks a lot. We appreciate browsers. Hyperlinks, you know hyperlinks. You click on something, boom, and it goes to another piece of content somewhere else. This is a very underutilized superpower, if you will. Especially if you're thinking about consumer marketing. Never tell somebody to go do something when you can shove the action into the content itself. Whether it be, it could be a QR code that jumps to a particular thing, could be product information, could be a demonstration, could be a sales site. But you should always put, and I try to do this in practice myself, every time I give you guys content, whether it be in e-learning or Slack, whenever possible, I try to always put a link back to whatever it is I'm asking you to do. I don't want you to go do stupid work. That kind of goes with the other thing I was saying earlier. Enter data once. Don't make people do things that they don't have to do. Make it easy for them, and they will be happy about that. That's the power of a hyperlink, that as you go through your life and your own businesses, you'll see that people underutilize this concept tremendously. Total missed opportunity. The point here is simply that not all browsers are created equally. You use your Chrome, and often you can't get to content, or use Microsoft Internet Explorer and you can't get to content. And I don't mean to pick on those two, because each one often is challenged. And the problem is they have modified the code against the standard, but they're doing it because they're trying to create some incremental benefit. Maybe it's speed of being able to present the content, or sometimes it's customization of particular content. But the point here is to know that each browser treats the content based on standards first, but then there's this layer of customization. There's also a layer of customization in terms of the content itself. People who create HTML need to stick by the rules, or sometimes they don't, and they modify the content because they want to get a specific functionality delivered to a particular browser. But they have to know, and you should know, that if you have any web engineer, I call them going rogue, that they're going off and they're customizing something, you have to know that you're essentially causing problems downstream. Now, maybe it's worth it because 80% of your audience are Chrome users, so you're going to customize content to Chrome, and it gives you that much of a bang for your buck. That's fine. But know that you've just basically blown away 20% of your audience that might not be Chrome users. So that's the importance of recognizing who has what kinds of market share. And this is not regional, this is global, these numbers that are on the page, but it depends on the region that you're targeting. That's something you as the business person have to know and ask when your web developers are targeting a particular target market. Netcraft gives you access into specific site data, so you can go to the Netcraft website and you can interrogate the content and infrastructure of a particular website. So you could type in www.unip.cz and you would find out more about that platform and what it's built on, what the usage is by region. So there's a lot of public data that you can get from the Netcraft site. You guys know what LANs and WANs are. I just explained the difference between packet switching versus circuit switching. This is kind of interesting. It's a bit of an eye chart, but the point is, I think that I would say is that on the top left picture, it's not to be confusing, but it's really it's the same products. It's a backbone router that the phone companies and internet service providers buy and manage. And then they sell that capacity to phone companies or through other distribution out to potential end users, where you and I buy it from people like Vodafone or O2 or Orange, or in the United States, Verizon or AT&T. They own this backbone, and then it comes out to us in various modes. And first step is it's connected to a router, and then a WAN or a LAN, out then to us as the end user. The point is, same building blocks, just reconfigured. And on the right, that's kind of just a little trivia. That's actually a heat map of the actual internet as of when I took that picture, which I think is a couple years old. So this is around the world, the billions and billions of connections to the internet. And this is just mind-blowing when you think about just this is the new world order in terms of how things are done. I know we live in it, so we don't think about it, but it is as impressive as it seems. I talked before about software, proprietary and open, and the networks have the same consideration. And I think what's most important to know is that when we talk about the internet, we're talking about an open architecture. So everybody who connects to the internet, and by that I mean the internet, that they have to follow those conventions. And to repeat, here are the protocols that we use. This is, I don't know if it's a little bit of trivia, but we, up until recently, were at IP version 4, where we could address 4.2, 4.3 billion components on the internet. And we thought when we first were designing the internet, we'd never reach that number. And then of course, we blew past it. So now we're using IPv6. What does that mean to you and I, just in terms of our usability? You might have seen like a 102.208.69.4, maybe something like that. It's usually a 4 with decimal point. That's 4 digits, 0.4 digits, 0.4 digits, 0.4 digits. That's IP version 4. But later you might see your IP address, and it might be something different, like it's a hexadecimal number. You might see it like a A8 C4 1 blah, 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 blah. And when it's hexadecimal, it's essentially not a base 10, but a base 16. So I get this logarithmic increase in number of devices that have a unique number. Just That's the punchline for that. The point here is simply that now we have billions and billions and billions of potential components on the connected to the internet that all have a unique IP address, which is a requirement for the basic workings of the internet. There's another service here, who is. You can type in who is and find out who owns, what's the business entity that owns a particular web page. Sometimes people try to hide behind web pages, but thankfully, by the agency's rules, it has to be transparent. So you actually can just type in who is UNYP.cz as an example, and it will tell you exactly that Sotiris Foutsis is the general manager, and UNYP.cz as an entity, or University of New York in Prague, I should say, is responsible for that particular web site. You know, maybe you know, domain names have a very specific structure. It's not random. Here's an example of a domain name, and the .edu is what we call a top-level domain. Not all domains are open. You and I could just get a .com as long as it's available, but you and I could not get an edu. We would have to have a school, and when we tried to sign up through companies like GoDaddy or Amazon Web Services or some other domain name service agency that has signed up with ICANN, Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, when I sign up with that company, they are validated by ICANN. And if it's an edu, then you also have to provide those documentation that in fact you're a certified educational institution. Same thing with .org. You would have to have some documentation in the United States. It's called a 501c. It's a particular type of entity that is a nonprofit. And so you'd have to prove that you had a 501c before you could start a .org. I'm not going to get into all of them, but the point is that we have a whole bunch of them, and then each one, in some cases, have limitations for their use. The next topic we talked about in the first or the second class is this client-server architecture, and this is not to be minimized, and you need to understand this, is that we have clients and the devices, and on those devices we have different layers of software that provide some service. Like one is a browser. So a browser is client software that runs on your device. Your laptop, could be your phone, could be a tablet. And it's connecting via the internet or some network to a server. And that server is providing services. Maybe it's providing your Netflix video. Maybe it's providing your e-learning class content. Maybe it's Zoom providing you this wonderful lecture. So the server is delivering to the client the content, and you as a business person would need to at least understand that, because it's back to kind of the next layer up from the infrastructure, the network infrastructure of how things are connected. What's running on those devices and how is it delivering those services? When I click on my device and say, open that web page, what specifically is the action that's being captured on that device and how that's being sent to the server to then respond with that request? Could be you're just clicking to go to the next page. It could be clicking, I want to buy that thing. I want that to go into my basket. Whatever that is, that client-server relationship, you as a user have to think about, not user, you as a business person, when you're working with your web or app developer, you have to think about, well, what's running where? Why? Because and you'll see this later, I'll point them out as in examples, it affects the user's experience. Remember UX, user experience, user interface, user experience, they're different things, but that user experience, I want to make sure that they have a good experience. They like using my product. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Spam, you know what spam is. There are a lot of resources to prevent spam from actually getting to your device. it's just important to know that that stuff's been developing over time, and it really knocks down the level of the problem that we have. HTML, hypertext markup language. We have this other kind of cousin to HTML. HTML is like, that's the web page as you see it. XML, it stands for extensible markup language, and it is you could think about it like indexing, almost like a spreadsheet, where you could say, okay, I have these different SKUs, going back to the retail example, and I have different pictures that are associated to each SKU. Maybe I have a different price of each product associated to each SKU. And that table indexing of information provides for a utility that can give me dynamic information to a web page. So if you think about Sasha, going back to Sasha's company's problem, they would be, and maybe they do, I don't know, they should be leveraging an XML model to, as I said before, suck information out of their suppliers so they don't have to rekey it. It comes into a table within their e-commerce site, and then that provides content to the users. See, and not nobody had to get involved, but you could monitor that. But the process of the information flowing from distributor to me to my customers it doesn't require re-entering of information. This technology is what gives us that capacity to automate those processes, so I can scale up without having to think about hitting everything all the time. These are just examples of what HTML looks like. Cascading style sheets. I'm not going to get into that specifically, but generally we have tools that help website developers. It used to be that at the beginning they had to know their HTML code. If you've ever coded, you'd have to know every little thing. Like if I wanted the heading on a web page to look a particular way, I would have to tell that text and that web browser, this is exactly how I want it to look. We don't do that anymore. We've got a lot of tools that automate that process. And one of them is using cascading style sheets so that I have a consistent look and feel across my whole website as I'm developing it. You wouldn't know this, by the way, ever, but you would know, you would certainly question if you had a website developer who was not using this as a methodology for developing your site. I described this before, and this is this client server model where you can see, you can do this on your own, you can read through this, but really stare at this one for a few minutes, not now, but later this week. But just go through and your own experience. Think about, okay, I'm on a website, and what's on my phone? You know, what is that? And then how did that get here? And when I click the button, imagine that it went through the internet and went to a server somewhere. But think to yourself, what server? Whose server? What did it do? Did it present me back an answer? And what is that answer? What was the content? And just imagine, I'm going to jump ahead here. Oh, I don't have it in this slide deck. It's in the next slide deck. Imagine that it probably had to bounce to 2 or 3 other servers. I'm going to go over this in a bit and to give you another example of how that data actually comes back. And it's at its basic architecture, it's very simple. All you have to think of is client and server. But actually, in practice, it's very complicated. There's servers all over the place. When you go to Google, for example, and you hit news, you can know that hundreds of sites are being interrogated. They're being asked for information to be pulled down to that one view that you got, to include all of the ads that showed up in the page, in the list of search results that you got. So it's hitting ad servers, it's hitting content, it's hitting the content provided by the advertising firm. It could be providing the content of products provided by that firm, as well as the news. It could be getting news media. So the point here is that the concept is simple, but how do you leverage it? And we'll talk about this in your projects. How are you leveraging the connections to different systems that are adding value to your business. Now, each one of you are going to be very different. Not one of your projects are going to look the same. And it's because of this kind of infinite opportunity for how would you architect a system that would support your environment. We've talked about Wi-Fi, blah, 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 blah. Okay, enough of that. I'm going to keep plowing ahead. I'm going to switch to another slide deck. Can you see this one? Web server and email technologies?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to apologize, and then I'm not going to apologize again. This is a lot of information, and I'm just running through it. I bet half of you know most of what I'm talking about, and half of you are like, what the F are you talking about? So just make sure that you understand them generally, and then when we have our makeup class, we can slow down and come back and go through specific examples until you understand that I'm not ever looking for all of you to become technical architects, but you generally have to understand the pieces and the parts and why they're important to understand. You and I, we would call up an engineer and say, what the hell is that about? You know, why is that performance so shitty between blah, blah? My customer service agents are getting these calls that they go to the website and the content for the products isn't there. Why is that? And then we would be able to have at least an intelligent conversation with the architects to say, oh, because we have a problem with our connection to our supplier. And then I would say, like, well, how do we fix that problem? Let's get that guy or gal on the phone and let's fix that problem. But you don't want to just have your hands up and go, oh my God, it's technical. I don't know what to do. You know, put your head under the pillow. Okay, now we're email, web server. So this is back to what I was talking about, client server. And I don't know, I always debate putting this slide up because there are a lot of different operating systems. You guys know Windows, you guys know Android, you know Mac, you know iOS. Those are 4 operating systems that almost everybody knows. And just know that there are other operating systems in the background, and they are on devices and they're on servers. And just know, I almost would never ask you that, but you should just know that there are other platforms. The reason it's important to know that there are other platforms is because when you're developing e-commerce solutions, as I say again and again, you have to know who your target audience is. And whether they be suppliers and they're running on one of these platforms, that it affects how you're architecting your systems. Again, not for you to worry about, but your architect and engineer would have to think about how do those things work together. Just know that there's a lot of complexity under the covers, and that's why those architects get paid so much money. Dynamic or static page. This is the content. So if you go to a website and it's just information, and if you come back the next day and it's the same information, it's probably a static site, and there's nothing. That's not. I mean, it depends on what the information is. If it's a recipe to make a bowl of rice, then I guess that's fine to be static. But if it's the weather report, well, I hope to goodness that that's dynamic, and that when I go back that next day, that the weather report changed because they have updated information. And this is the point. You want to make sure that you're developing web content that is dynamic and engaging with your clients as appropriate. Again, if it's static because your address doesn't change, that's fine. But if it's dynamic, the prices for the products or the available inventory for those products change, then that should be dynamic content. The important thing here, I've said it before, is highlighted. Where's the action taking place? So we call it server-side scripting or client-side scripting. Scripting is like coding. So when you're creating an app for a device, that's client-side, of course. And if you're creating an app that's running in the cloud that's delivering services to a device, That's server side. And not now, but later in the class, we'll talk about like what conditions would it be that what would I want to be running on my server and what would I want to be running on my client? And this usability, user experience is terribly affected by the architect's choice of, do I want that to happen on my device or up here? A great example of this is email. Email that's properly architected on your device allows you to see email that's been downloaded to your device. I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you don't have an internet connection and then you can't get the latest emails and you're like, oh shit, where's the new stuff? And often if it's a poorly architected email client, it didn't fetch the most recent email before you lost your connection. And then you're shit out of luck and you don't get your email until you get connected again. So that's an example of where you have to think about, well, how much information am I going to put here and how much am I going to leave on my server in the cloud? A couple of you actually have experience programming, so this isn't a surprise to you. These are just languages. I would never ask you about the language. Just know that programming languages exist that are very common. Python is really kind of the most common language, and Ruby on Rails for developing applications. This is just yet another example of the relationship between the client and the server. And this other thing is what I was talking about before. There are a lot of servers up there that are servicing a client request typically. And so this is just a use case, an example of how that could be configured. Blah, blah, email. Obviously, you know, email's a big deal. Spam's a big deal. We've solved the spam problem mostly, but it still exists. You wouldn't use an email system that didn't have spam filters at different levels. It used to be that we had spam filters only at our device level, which was that was a joke because essentially all of the internet was filled up with spam. But now we filter that stuff further back into the system so that only a few spammy things show up. And in fact, Google as an example, if you use Gmail, you can click on something and say that's spam. And then for you personally, that content won't come through anymore because Google will keep that in the cloud and filter it out before it comes to your device. There are different approaches to filtering. I'm not going to get into that. But if you're a spammer today, you should expect to go to jail in the United States. So that's a good thing. These other slides are just that we have a lot of utilities that connect that allow us to check, because websites have become so complex. You can't like go into the website and hire a team of like specialists to go make sure that everything works. Well, you could, but it'd be very expensive. It shouldn't be a lot cheaper. In fact, a great example of this is just an example, is like a link checker. So this is software that goes through your web pages, because there's no such thing as a website. A website is all the web pages together. There's a home page, and there are other pages. But as they're hyperlinks, whether to within the website or externally to maybe partner sites, all of those hyperlinks are checked by this software. In both ways, it checks those coming in and those going out. That's called a reverse link checker. So just know that we have tools. So if you hit a site that, and we've all done it, right? And you get oh my gosh, I forgot. Is it 401, 404? What's the error?
Error 404.
404, there you go. Page not found. Today, if I go to a website and I clicked on something and I get a 404, I think that guy's a monkey. I mean, I want to call up their IT department and say, you fire that person. I mean, or it probably doesn't work there anyway. So or hire somebody, run, because it's cheap. I mean, all of these things, we have tools to do. This is where we're in Web 3.0. We're past that bullshit stuff. We have tools that are cheap, that are effective, that solve these problems. So when you hit these problems, you know somebody's got their hands off the wheel, as they say. This is interesting, and this is kind of old school, pointing out that we have these prices for these components. I told you before, you would never buy a computer. Well, actually, that's not true. You probably would buy a computer, maybe one for your office, or one for your development team, because they physically want the device in their office to manipulate. But like one, that's it. In India, I have one server, and it's just so my Indian guys and gals can rip it apart and play with it and whatever. I think it's more of a toy than anything else. We have 856 servers in Amazon, and I pay almost nothing per month for each one of these systems. And so I can either buy, you know, at $1,000 a piece, roughly, servers, or I can just go rent them from Amazon for nothing. Oh, and by the way, as soon as that server is outdated, Amazon, not me, throw that one away and bring in a new one. So I'm always on the latest model of whatever. So this idea of these prices is really, hopefully, to scare the shit out of you and say, don't buy, rent it. You don't have to own it. There's no ego in that. If you want to own one, then go buy a used one from the local shop for a few bucks and put it in the corner and put a plant on it, because that's about all that it's worth. These are important things that your engineering team would understand. Benchmarking, this is the idea that we can test different configurations. We run the workload on this configuration of maybe a server or a network or an operating system or an application or a database, whatever, it doesn't matter. Whatever the configuration is, the things that we put together, and we can run it, and then we can have another configuration. We can change however many variables we want, and then we can run those side by side and say, okay, which one won? Like a car. You put like your Camaro over here and your GTO over here, and you know, who won the race? And you just use a stopwatch and say, okay, that's a faster car. That's a faster configuration of technology that would provide me a particular resource and benefit. And so we use that at the highest level. Like I used to sit with the vice president of user interface testing, woman named Janet at Schwab, a large bank in the United States. And she would literally just get two computers and go to the Schwab site and hit the button on each one of them. I mean, that's kind of crude form of testing, but she just wanted to see in those two environments what kind of reaction she was going to get in terms of usability. She had actually hundreds of people working for her also doing that, using modeling and stuff like that. But this is a very crude example of benchmarking. And throughput and response time, and if I have centralized environment, or do I have decentralized, or I have multiple systems doing activities? This is just basic architectural options that I could use to affect my architecture that might have different performance outcomes. The other thing, just as one element of this that I'll zoom in a little closer on, and that's load balancing. You might wonder, like, how is it that I can have 10 users or 1 million users pounding on a website? How does that website manage that activity? And this, at the highest level, is the design architecture. We have this thing that sits in the front of all that traffic, and it's called a load balancer. And basically, it just sits there and just says, okay, server number 1, you take the first request. Server number 2, you take the second request. Server number 3, you take the third request. Server number 4, back to server number 1. And it just sits there, but it's monitoring the capacity and the available capacity of all the systems sitting behind it. It's a traffic cop, and it just makes sure that there's plenty of resource to react to whatever problems, whatever workload that's coming its way. Just to know that's why sites don't go down or shouldn't go down. I told you before that some sites go down because they have an overload and they haven't planned for that capacity, but it's their decision. They chose to limit the available capacity in 2020. Maybe 5 or 10 years ago, dynamic resources weren't always available to every organization, but with today, with Amazon Web Services, anybody can have infinite resources. It's just a matter of deciding how much can I afford to spend to get that workload. But if it's on a sales site, why wouldn't I crank it up? My expenses are going to go way up, but what else is going to go up? Hopefully my revenue. And so really, I'm just scaling the whole business up to the opportunity that's coming my way. Well, that was the fastest I've ever gone through all those two topics. Where am I? Where am I? Hang on one second. I'm looking for the button that allows me to jump back to my other slides for some reason. There it is. There it is. New share. Okay, so that's all I had for today, except for your homework. I already gave you the first activity, which is your project. And the second activity is Bob's Tools and Things. And it's a case study. It's online, it's an e-learning. I'll give you access to it after I'm done with this call. But it's, I want you to think about these two questions while you're going through it. There's specific activities in the case below what I'm asking you to do. But I'd like you to, this is kind of one of those basic revenue minus expenses equals profit kind of questions. It's like, what's this thing about while you're reading it? I mean, it's a guy's hardware store. I mean, it's not complicated, but what's it about? And what's it not about? And so not to be too Yoda on you, but think about that when you're going through the case and specifically following the case. It is like 45 minutes to an hour to do the work, and you can do it in groups or do it by yourself. It's up to you. So here's what's next, huh? So we already talked about that, activity 1.0, submit it to Slack, do the case study, and if you don't understand anything, let me know. And the last thing in the next couple minutes, I don't know if enough of you are online that had a sense for those two kind of technology covered topics, chapters 2 and 3, but does anybody have a preference for when we would do a makeup? Let me ask you this. Is anybody interested in joining? Makeups are never mandatory, even though classes, I don't think attendance is mandatory anyway, but does anybody want? I have to have it. So even if nobody shows up, it's got to be scheduled and whatever, but is anyone interested in a makeup class?
So we would cover, in the makeup class, we would cover chapter 2 and 3.
Right.
Yeah, why not?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Same.
Does anyone have any suggestions on like when? Like if somebody threw out a time and that might work for them, and then everyone else can say, no, I got to go to church that day or something. Hey, if I were you, if you wanted to do a makeup, I would totally say what's good for you, because that might be the time.
Yeah, definitely not in the weekend.
Of course.
Wednesday.
Wednesdays?
Wednesday.
No, I'm busy on Wednesday. We can do it on Tuesday. I can do it on Tuesday at 12 p.m. like start.
I guess we can have a poll.
No, it's not a poll. It's like it depends on the majority who has classes and who has.
Yeah, that's what poll is about.
No, it's not.
Has anybody done a poll online?
It is possible on Zoom, but I think only you can initiate it, I guess.
Oh my God, I don't have enough time for that. Let me go off I'll go offline, I'll create a poll, and I'll invite you guys to vote on a time. But I heard Tuesday or Wednesday. Are there any other? I could start with that.
Or
Any
Friday.
other days? Those are good days for most people.
Yep, Friday.
Yeah, Friday would not be
Friday.
that
Yeah.
too.
Everyone's Friday?
No.
No.
You don't like Friday. It's not that you're not available. It's that.
Yes.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I shouldn't ruin your weekend by ruining the day before the weekend. Okay, Tuesday or Wednesday. Is later okay? Like if we did, I would assume, Abdel, if Wednesday didn't work, is Wednesday later better? Or is getting into the evening intrusive into your nightlife?
I actually have on Wednesdays, I have from 3 to 9 class. So it's impossible to have 3 classes a day, you know?
3 to 9, wow, that's abusive.
Oh, come on, I have it every semester 9 hours, and then the other day 6 hours.
6 hours, 6
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah, no, okay, I'll just do a poll and we'll figure it out. I mean, I don't care. I would do 2 sessions.
I just want to be frank with you, actually. Those presentations that you have mentioned, I'm actually, like, I can say I'm 80% familiar with. So if I miss the opportunity to attend, it's like I'm not missing anything. So like, you can simply give the chance to the priority for the people who like
Right.
have no
Okay.
idea about this.
I'll do it this way. So Wednesday, what time Wednesday works for everyone else?
12?
12.
12?
Yeah.
Everyone's in on 12 Wednesday?
I have a class then.
Yes.
You can also have
Begrudgingly?
a class.
To go 3 hours. We can go as long as whatever time you guys want. And then Abdel separately, if I would do a call, I'm available, whatever. And not just Abdel, anybody, if this time doesn't work for you and you have questions and you just want to call me and say, hey, there's these 3 things I don't understand. I would set up a call and we just talk about those 3 things. I'm fine. I would just try to get all of us together if I can. So I'll shoot for Wednesday at 12 o'clock and I'll record it and we'll put it online and we'll just go through and make sure we answer all the questions. And then separately, if you guys have additional questions, and by the way, if you have questions about anything, call me or Slack me or email me or spam me or whatever.
Good idea.
I'll answer. All right. Okay, is everyone good?
All good.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, have a great week then, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday at 12, some of you, and the rest of you, Thursday at 3. And get ready for that quiz. Surprise quiz.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Goodbye.
Right. Goodbye. Have a nice week. And
Bye.